What's up, guys? I am back after taking about a week off to spend with my family, and we are kicking things off with a game that exceeded all of my expectations, and I was basically wrong about every assumption I made. This is The Alters, a game where you're stranded alone on a hostile planet with no one to rely on except yourself, and yourself with a mullet, and yourself with a mustache, and yourself with clones. I'm talking about clones. It's weird, it's deep, it's way more than I expected. By the end of it, I might have even learned something about myself, or at least something about managing 7 different emotionally unstable versions of me with wildly different trauma responses. Anyway.
Here's your editing.
Well, thank you. Don't forget to tell the others to like and subscribe.
Well,
You feel free to like and subscribe as well. We're trying to get to 250. And we'll talk about this in a second. But for now, on to the review. Let's break it down. What I thought that The Alters was going to be was not what I got. What I thought The Alters was going to be was Rust with spreadsheets. And that's because it was marketed as this survival title. That's what I kept seeing it listed as, was a survival game. And so all other games in this category, whenever you see a survival game like Rust or something like that, the whole thing is always that there's no story. It's just that you get dropped in and you get to be on the server for as long as you can survive. And then eventually either like you win or you die and you start again, you get to a different server, whatever. It's this whole thing. And you just repeat that cycle. So that's kind of what I was expecting. But then we would see video clips and things like that that made me think, hey, there's something more to this. So I finally, I downloaded it, I played it. And yeah, what I got was something far, far deeper than simply a survival game. It was not Rust. It was more like playing The Martian, the movie with Matt Damon where he gets left behind on Mars and he has to figure out a way to survive until he can be rescued. And that is basically the premise of the game. There is an accident. You are left on this planet. So you're going to a planet with the intention of harvesting this element that we do not have on Earth. So it's incredibly valuable. So they send this vessel to go there to hit this base, and everybody dies but you. You are the only survivor.
They're dead.
Wait, who's dead?
My team is dead!
You show up, and your first order of business is don't die. So you have to get to the base. You then have to get the base running. This is where some of these resource management aspects come into. The base is expandable like you would expect, and I thought that would be kind of what it is. That's where I kind of thought the spreadsheets were going to be. I thought it was just going to be sort of maybe walking from module to module and sort of making sure that switches are flipped or things are turned on or fuel is stockpiled or whatever. And there is some of that there, but it becomes so much deeper. And as no secret in the marketing, the whole thing is that you have to make copies of yourself in order to maintain this base. When that was introduced, what I thought, I expected the idea behind it to be you make a clone of yourself. The clone is imperfect. This leads to weaknesses that you will have to work around. Maybe it has a shelf life or something like that, and you'll have to work your way around it. And that's actually not how the cloning mechanism works. What you are making is far different than simply a clone of yourself. This is what gets really interesting and what really drives the story and sort of the existential aspect of the game that really makes you think. And so what these clones actually are is quantum versions of yourself. So whenever you get to the ship and you are given access to the computer so that you can do all this stuff to keep yourself alive and keep the base operating. The quantum computer, you see what they call a mind record. And so you start off and you see all these significant events in the main character's life that you can read little blurbs about along this timeline, all these significant events. So this quantum computer, whenever it comes time to make a clone, you go to this quantum computer, and what you are actually doing is this quantum computer is taking all these calculations. It takes everything that it knows off of your life, as well as the lives of other people that have gone through this process of mapping their minds. And it can use that information to extrapolate an alternate version of yourself. So you go into the quantum computer and you're like, okay, something went wrong. I need a technician. I'm not a technician, and I can only clone myself. I need a technician. So the quantum computer has to find a way to, okay, if you made this choice versus this choice, what choices could you have made that would have made you a technician? That's what we need. So now you bring this technician to life. So it's you, but it's a you that has had different life experiences than you have had. It has an entire
Because
memory.
it took the technician route.
Yes. So it has an entirely different memory, personality, sometimes accents, sense of style than you do. Hey, quick interruption. There's a couple of pro tips that I forgot to mention in the review, and I wanted to go ahead and drop those now. And between those, I also wanted to tell you about this hoodie, because yes, this really is my official editing uniform now. Alters tip number 1. Even though the entire mission goes pear-shaped right from the jump, the company that sent you is still going to bug you incessantly about stockpiling massive amounts of rupidium. You can ignore them. You will want to ignore them, but I would recommend that you don't. Do what they ask, not for them, but because it might have major implications later on in the game. And speaking of outcomes, let's talk about editing in this hoodie. It's from a brand you've probably all seen on social media called Comfort. I have edited this entire video wearing it. It's ridiculously soft, ethically made, slightly weighted, and basically feels like I'm wearing a freshly microwaved blanket. Or fresh out of the dryer, if that's how you do it. If you want 15% off any order from Comfort Clothing, just use our link, comfort.com/hardcore. They're also running a summer sale right now with up to 70% off. And yes, our discount will stack on top of that. If you decide to pick something up during the sale, thank you. It helps the channel. But if you don't, that discount isn't going anywhere. You can always use it later, and you can use it as many times as you want. Alters pro tip number 2. Always over-prepare. Sometimes the game gives you 2 branching choices, and both will require a bit of extra prep work. Even if you're absolutely sure which option you're going to pick, prepare for both. Thank you for listening. Now back to the clones.
So let's say the original you is this loose going guy or whatever. I would think if you created a technician, that person was more focused in school, which would have created a whole new set of life experiences. Maybe they didn't go out and hang out with their friends as much. And so they're more introverted. Maybe you're an extrovert.
It's 100% that way.
Wow. Okay. That's
absolutely
the vibe I got when
way.
I saw
that is one of the driving forces. So you get into this thinking, okay, I have to manage resources. Then you start this cloning process and you quickly realize I also have to manage people and personalities and emotions and things like that. So you and like I said, everybody has these different branches from you. But like I said, you have this timeline that you look at initially, and then all of these things are splinters from your initial timeline, but they could be at different points. One of them could branch from your timeline very early, and so you share very few things in common. Others could branch away from your choices much later, and you have made all of the same choices except for one, and that led them down their path.
Wow.
And they have a much shorter period of time that they don't share with you. And this leads to vastly different outlooks on life, personality traits. Something like in the timeline that it's covered is that you had an abusive father, and your father was horrifically abusive to your mother. And you, as the main character, one of his regrets is that he never had the balls to stand up to his dad. And he actually left. Once he had the ability and the means to leave to go to school, to go to college, he took that route and he left. The technician, he stayed and he protected his mom. He stood up to your dad. So he has this take no crap off anybody mentality now, and actually views you as a coward for running away. That creates a dynamic between you and the technician that you have to get around.
I'm trying to imagine waking up as one of these clones and going, you're not me, I'm me. You're the copy. And then the realization that, okay, so you didn't stay at home to help mom? What the hell, dude?
So
what the hell, man?
That literally happens every single time. So every time you make an altar, which you can make a maximum throughout the game, there are more than this. But it will take multiple playthroughs to get this.
Now.
But yeah, you'd have this conversation with every time that you make an altar. They wake up and you have to. They're always very confused, and you got to be like, "Hey, so hi," and obviously they wake up. They recognize themselves talking to them. And so you have to go through this whole thing of, okay, how are they going to handle this stressful situation of waking up and looking at themselves? Then you have to quickly figure out, okay, what's their personality like? How can I best explain this in a way that will not upset them or make the matters worse? Because they have these emotions, and the more that they get upset or bothered, depressed or angry, that makes them work for less time, which obviously makes it more difficult to resource gather. So they factor that bit into the gameplay and make it a mechanic every time that you wake up one of these clones. The gameplay is so much more than I expected because, like I said, it's it's labeled this survival game, and there are survival elements to it. But I would not call it a survival game because it is nothing like the other games that are in that category. It's not Rust. It's not Conan. It's not any
Art.
of these things that do that. There's resource management. There's weather and surviving weather, managing power and fuel and tension and food. All these things.
So it's non-combat related survival, and not survival in the strictest sense, unless you're telling me you get into combat with your own clones.
So, not to
Because that would
spoil
be
anything,
awesome.
but there is all of that. There is combat. It
Okay.
is not it's not like the deepest combat. You're not gonna have. It's not gonna be Borderlands
Right.
4. You're not gonna have a limitless number of guns at your disposal or anything like that. But there is combat and there is exploration. I would label this more of an exploration RPG than I would a survival game, because key to your survival is your exploration. The base that you are on is mobile. The main game happens in sort of 3 acts or 3 journeys that you make. You move the base 3 times, and each time you move, you have to start over with a completely different terrain than what you just had. You move, you now have to find resources all again. So you go out, you make these, you go out and explore, you make discoveries, and then you have to establish mines. You have to excavate these elements. You have metals, you have organics, you have enriched materials, you have minerals, things like that you have to mine for. But you have to discover those deposits, and then you have to find the best spot for your machine to go in to get that. Then you have to connect. This is where it kind of starts to feel like Death Stranding. You then have to connect that machine to your base, and you have to fight the terrain to do it, because sometimes maybe you accessed this area to find this mineral deposit.
Right.
You accessed it through a tunnel, but you connect the machine to your base via these towers, and the towers, because they're too high, they can't go low enough for the tunnel to get it through there. So you have to find a way that's not the way that you got there. You have to find a way to connect these back to your base. And so in that way, it starts to feel very much like Death Stranding with some of that. So there's all kinds of elements here.
I have to ask, is it possible to create a clone you didn't need?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So they're just walking around the ship. They don't really have, because you accidentally created the wrong skill set clone. Or can you later find, do they die? Is it possible for them to die without spoiling anything? I have so many questions.
Without spoiling anything, I will say that all of these have been factored into the game. And like I said, you can have a maximum of 7 altars that you make throughout one playthrough, but there are more altars than that. So in order to experience all of the altars, you would have to play the game multiple times. But one thing, and this is very much where it takes inspiration from Disco Elysium, and that is, in Disco Elysium, you would have these thoughts that you could ponder, right? You would have something would be said in a conversation, and it would make you had the option to make your character think about this thought. And if he thought enough about this concept, he could apply what he learned to future conversation trees. And that happens in altars, where each altar, ultimately, if you get an advanced enough relationship with them throughout a playthrough, you can learn a lesson from them. And that lesson will open up a conversation tree that you wouldn't otherwise have had, or a choice within conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And then once you beat the game, if you start to play over, even if you, there's no game plus. You don't get to start, you have to start over with resources and everything, but you can choose different altars. But the lessons that you learned from previous altars, those still stay. And so you can still apply the charisma that you learned, or the assertiveness that you learned, or reliance that you learned, and those different options, those will show up to aid you in future playthroughs. That's the sort of the basics of the exploration element, the resource management element. Then of course, all of the different modules that you create, you have to have, to make this module, you have to have this many metals, this many organics, this many materials. You have to make that. And then you also have to survive storms in the area. You have these things that you don't need otherwise. But then if a storm hits, you need these really bad. And so you have to make sure those are so you've only got one workshop. So now you've got to make sure that all these things can be kept up with. And so you're now prioritizing what's being made. Do I need more pylons to connect my mining machines to my base? Do I need more of those more desperately than I need radiation filters for the base or something like that? You also have to manage food, that kind of thing. And it all sounds very overwhelming, but it's introduced in a great way. And I have not gotten this way about a game in a long time. This game was basically a time distortion field for me because I would be like, okay, let me just play a little bit more. And then I would look at my watch to check the time and 4 hours had passed because you get so engrossed. And I know why it is because it's broken into days. It's not like this, and it is meticulously broken into days. So it's not like this thing where it's like, oh, the sun's out. Okay, we'll wait. The sun will go down, whatever. You have a clock. You see, like the clock matters because people work from 9 to whatever. And, that changes the amount of time that they will work depends on how happy they are or how content they are. And so you are very aware of the clock at all times. And so you have 24 hours each day and you have to go to sleep. You have to go to sleep. Otherwise you can't, you work slower or you can't work at all. So the sleeping is very important. So you have 24 hours in each day to work and you cannot save while you play. The game auto saves every morning and that's it. So you wake up and then that game saves. So if you do something that day and it doesn't get saved, it's gone. I would play this until 3 a.m. on multiple occasions because since it has this day structure where you wake up, you complete the day. And if you want what you've done in that day to count, you have to go to sleep so that you can wake up the next morning. And then as soon as you wake up, you're like, well, it's kind of like reading a book, like a page turner, right? Where it's like, you have these definite signifiers of time, right? So in a book, you're like, I can just read one more chapter. Because books are in chapters, so you can be like, I can read one more chapter. So this has it where it's like, since it does this thing where it's days, each day has 24 hours, and this is basically the standard 1 minute is 1 second, 1 hour is 1 minute. So it's basically 24 minutes, maximum of 24 minutes. But if you do something, that can also speed up time. Anyways, if you wake up and it's like, oh, I need to talk to this person, I need to talk to this altar, or let me just do that real quick. I can do one more day. I can do one more day, and then I'll be done. And you chain that together 10 times, and it's 3 a.m. on a work night, and you're exhausted. I think it's so addictive because it has that structure of like, if you're just playing a typical game, there's no definitive stopping points, right? But if you already kind of know what the stopping point is, it makes it easier to fool yourself into being like, well, let me just get there and then I'll stop. Everything will be fine. And then it just goes on and on and on. But I stayed up several nights until 3 a.m. playing this game. Another thing that I would say about the altars is just the themes that it tackles and the depth of characters and scenarios that it covers is something I did not expect. You go into this and obviously it's dealing with cloning. It's dealing with this quantum theory or quantumly theoretical, whatever concept of if you had made these other decisions, what would it have been like? How would that have played out? But then it's like, well, are these memories, since you're making a clone and the quantum computer is putting these memories in their head, are these memories fake? Is this just a memory that's based off of stats that this computer is running? Or is this something that is happening in a parallel universe and we've tapped into it? Are these memories that these people have, are they real? Are the people that they remember, the people that they had relationships with, are these people real? Or was it just ones and zeros?
Not only am I getting a lot of Martian vibes, and you're right, because Matt Damon's character, Mark Watney, we saw many different Mark Watneys. Maybe they weren't clones like the altars, but there was more than a dozen different Mark Watneys in that movie and in that book as well. But I'm seeing some strong Matrix vibes in this because your perception determines your reality, and a little bit of altered carbon.
There are so many influences in this game, both in media and other games. It's crazy. And the narrative, like I said, it focuses on some pretty heavy topics and some pretty big ethical dilemmas that you would not have expected to be confronted with. You have to make big decisions. There are so many branching narratives here where your decisions, the decisions that you make, can go so many different ways. And this is what's going to make it so replayable. One, the fact that you can't get all the alters in a single playthrough. You'll want to know about the other alters that you didn't get to play before. And then also some of the decisions that you make, you'll want to know, well, what if I had done this? And some of the decisions that you make, there will be somebody that's upset, somebody that's happy. Some of the decisions that you make, there's a clear right answer, a clear wrong answer. Some decisions that you make, everybody will be happy. Some decisions you make, no one will be happy. And some decisions, there's no good answer to. You have to select from one of multiple bad options where there's no good answer, and you're going to feel like crap no matter which way you go. It really makes you think about these ethical choices, and you develop this relationship with these alters, and it kind of makes you think about your own life, because you see how different these alters are from you, the character that you are playing as. And then you can kind of think back on your own life and think like, man, what would other choices I have made? Where would that lead me? It really becomes like this existential experience whenever you play the game. There's also twists in the game that some of them I did not expect. Some of them I did. There are also twists that I expected that did not actually come to pass. Maybe that's just me because I love the genre and I'm so used to watching movies like Moon and things like that. There are some things that I expected to happen, some reveals that I expected to see that were not the case, where I had been playing the entire game thinking this is what I was working towards, and that was not the case. So I think if you're a fan of the genre, I think that you're still going to see things. It's not just going to be jaded. I think it's still going to throw some things at you that you did not expect to see coming.
Even if this game doesn't do what I'm about to say, it's still a cool case study on internal struggle, conflict, and resolution. In that I look at my life and I was like, man, I wish I would have done this. Even if it's something simple, like when you look at the cover of the altars and all of them look different except for the face. I can think of many times in my life, man, I wish I could have long hair. And I never have in my whole life. But maybe an alternate version of me that made a different decision. Hey, that's what he did, right? And there was times that I wished I was more conservative, and then times I wished I was more free with what I was doing. And I'm wondering if all those, even if they don't meet my expectations, that I see that and go, oh my God, that's exactly what I would have done.
There was even one that it just sort of blew my mind because of how much thought went into this scenario. Kind of like what you're talking about here, because you see some of the alters deal with things that you didn't expect to be problems, where one of them was a miner. One of the alters, okay, well, because each of them, so you're basically creating them for their benefits. Yeah, you're creating them for their benefits. So this guy can get you resources faster because that's what he does.
Okay.
So you make him, but now again, this is a quantum reality or whatever. This projected things, and the memories are put into him, but it's clones of current used DNA, and they're creating the body based off of that with these memories. And this guy in his life had lost an arm in an accident. And so whenever you bring him back, it's a clone of you. So he has an arm again. So he wakes up and he now has an arm. You would think, oh, well, that's going to be great for him. And it's not. It's not great for him. That's a very jarring. That's a very jarring thing to happen. And
his life had adapted to life with one arm.
Yeah, and that had become a part of who he was, and so it's things like that you would even think would be beneficial, that has these really deep impacts on some of these characters, and it becomes this wild thing where you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. That happens so many times in this game. So, like I said, so to call it a survival game, I think is such a disservice to what this game truly is. I would certainly call this more of an exploration RPG with survival elements to it.
I feel like, to me, that the survival is the ethical dilemma of dealing with different versions of yourself.
If it sounds remotely something in your wheelhouse, if it sounds like it would be like you would find any of these aspects interesting, I would 100% recommend you play it, because everything that it tries to do, it does so well. Combat, I would say, combat's not the focus of the game. So combat is the one thing that's kind of thrown in to accommodate, but in the service of these other things. But everything else, It's done so well, and I'm not going to say that the resource management is not tedious. You actually do have a slider. You can make it far more tedious if you wanted to. But as with any resource management game, the further you get in, the more research you do, the more development that you have on your technology, that will become easier as you go through. You do this initial really tough grind on resources, but that will become easier as you go along. And the focus becomes the choices that you make and learning about your alters and managing the people that you've created. I don't consider this a spoiler because I'm not going to tell you the context that it's set in, who said it. And there's a lot of people that will play this game that will never even have this conversation. This conversation basically boiled down to a mistake that has positive consequences is not a mistake. And at first it sounded like a cool thing to say, but the more I thought about it, the deeper it kind of became. It was sort of like this ticking time bomb in your brain that the more you thought about it, the more true it became, where you think of these things as mistakes that you've done in your own life. And then you realize other things that, well, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't have done this if I hadn't have made that mistake, or I wouldn't have met this person if I hadn't made this mistake, or this or that. And then it becomes, well, if that's the case, and these are things that you find important to you, was that even a mistake then? Or was that just the way that it needed to be? And that was a thing that, so whenever I rolled credits on this game, it left me thinking about my own life, my own choices, and then immediately started the game over again. Started another round to do more alters, different choices, and just go it again.
To me, that's the purpose of any media, is that you reach a point where it's like, how does this affect my life? And what meaning did this, or what purpose, or what, point or lesson did this have on my life? Because as we always say, life imitates art, art imitates life, and whatnot.
I could not recommend this game any more strongly. If this sounds like it's anything even similar to what would be of interest to you, absolutely play this game. It also goes by quick. There is an absolute timeline that you are working against.
Sometimes that's good.
Well, and yeah, exactly. No, yeah, it's great, especially because the clear idea behind this game is to allow you to do it multiple times. If you spend 60 hours on a game, the first thing that you do after you beat it is not like, let's do that again. But if you can do the game in 10 hours, maybe you can't. I don't know. I didn't look at how long it took me to go through the thing, but it can actually vary because you continue to move the base, and the thing that makes you have to move the base is that the sun will rise. And when the sun rises, it's not a good thing here. You can't deal with that. So you got to get out of the way of the sunrise, and then you outrun the sunrise a little bit, and you have a certain amount of time that you can wait. But you don't know how long that time is. You don't know how it'll let you know, oh, the sun's getting closer. And then once it's to a certain point, it'll say like, okay, this many days to sunrise. And I will say this, no spoilers, but I will give you a pro tip. And that is stay everywhere except the very first location. The very first location, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have this sort of thing. You can get out of the first location as quickly as you want. Everything after that, the actual journeys, do not leave those locations early. If you can, don't, because you'll probably be able to leave them early, but you will not get everything that you can get out of them. I'll just say that. Stick around as long as you can. Then whenever you need to leave. But don't leave early just because you can, because you'll be missing out on some stuff. Again, to wrap up, Alters is a phenomenal blend of so many different genres. To call it a survival game is an absolute disservice. Go play it. If you have Game Pass, you have no excuse to not play this. You can play it on consoles. If you have Game Pass, you can play it for free. Go check it out. It's worth your time. It's not a huge time commitment, but you will find yourself, I would say, involuntarily committed to that time, because it is a time slip, dude. You'll snap out of it, and hours will have gone by. Thank you so much for watching the entire video. If you like this breakdown, go ahead and hit the like button. Or don't, and let your clones deal with the guilt. And as always, please subscribe for more game reviews, nerd debates, and deep dives. And if you want to do your daily activities, such as editing video in God tier comfort like I do, check out Comfort at comfort.com/hardcore. It'll always get you 15% off, even if you've made terrible life choices in multiple timelines. I'll see you next time.